to Offlimits. Liberal, irreverent, and really, really gay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Offlimits show. Thanks for joining me tonight here on the show. I appreciate it. Just as a quick aside, if you're interested in listening to more of the show or in our archives or learning more about me, you can go to offlimitshow.com. You can go to Twitter. You can go to Facebook. You can go to Spreaker.com. And I'm all over the place, so feel free to type in Offlimits Show in Google. You can find me there as well. And also, you can feel free to call into the show most times when I'm having call-in shows as well through Skype. Tonight we're not doing call-ins, but if you want to call in the future, you can always call in using Skype for free or using the number on my webpage, which is down at the moment because, unfortunately, all of my web pages are down until they get it fixed. I have some kind of database error on my pages, and so they're all down. And so I talked to tech support about 3-4 hours ago, actually more like 6 hours ago, and they said they're escalating it and they will have it up hopefully by the morning, so we'll see what happens. But anyway, this freaking hosting place I use is fucking stupid. Anyway, I'm thinking I'm going to find somebody else because they have downtime a lot. But anyway, on to the topic at hand tonight. Tonight we're talking about conservative logic. Now, that to me, of course, is an oxymoron, and everyone who listens to my show knows I am a tried and true liberal. And what does it mean to be a liberal? To be a liberal means to be open-minded, free thinker, to be accepting and of new ideas. That to me is what being a liberal means. Being conservative is somewhat of the opposite, with someone who is stuck in their own ideas, their own beliefs, and is not willing to really, truly entertain someone else's thoughts, even if they act like they are. So I'm going to talk about the differences between conservatives and liberals on specific issues, as well as talking about sort of the fallacies that exist in their way of thinking and their logic. Unfortunately, hold on one second. I have, unfortunately, I know, hold on. I have to do something real quick. Hold on a second. Copied that from the Diva show about Annie-Lennox and forgot to change it. I changed it on the show itself. Trust me, I know that I'm a Madonna fag. Okay, anyway, so sorry, I had made I copied and pasted something from a previous show when I did Acoustic Mass the other day. I did Acoustic Mass the other day, a few days ago. I did Annie Lennox's Diva album, in which we feature an entire album on the show. And then on that show, I had put in there, it was her debut album as a solo artist. And so I copied and pasted that when I did Madonna's Ray of Light, except changing some of the details about Ray of Light and that sort of thing about Madonna. And I forgot to change the portion of the part where it said it was her debut album, and someone just called me out on it. I'm like, I know it's not her debut album. I'm not a moron. I'm a Madonna fag. I think I know that. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. So that's what we're talking about tonight. And there's a lot of tactics they use, unfortunately, but there's a lot of things that people say, two things about life, that everything is certain in life are death and taxes. Those are the two things that are certain in life, And a third, I think, is probably going to be the fact that conservatives and liberals will rarely ever agree on anything at all. Now, the other night, I think it was last night, as a matter of fact, I was actually on the Jay Sands show. I wasn't on the show, but I was listening to his show here on Spreaker.com. And I was listening, and it was a typical show. They were talking about politics or whatever. I've heard his show a few times, He and I are not people who ever agree. He's a conservative. I'm a liberal. And so, and almost everyone who goes and listens to his show is conservative. So whenever I go in there, it's like going into the lion's den. But I like to see how other people think. And that's sort of what I'm talking about tonight, And I'll be honest, I love it when people when I meet people or encounter people who think differently than I do, because I love a good debate. And because what it does is it allows two people to discuss issues in a way that they may not have thought about before. And to me, that's a good thing. It's good to have that kind of conversation. How else are you ever going to actually grow as an individual or evolve in your thinking, if you never challenge what you think? If you're constantly surrounded by people who think exactly the way you do, you constantly watch television shows or networks that constantly reiterate your thoughts and what you think, instead of actually watching and considering the opponent's or the other side's viewpoint, how are you ever going to really grow or understand if you ever challenge yourself by discussing things and ideas that differ from those you're comfortable with? And so the problem, however, lies, for me, is with ignorance. And, it comes down to perspective as well. And the ability to kind of view an issue with an outside perspective is something that is often lacking in conservatives and sometimes in liberals as well. Now, it's never really been, it's always been actually a big part of, like I said, politics. But when it comes to debates with conservatives and stuff like that over the past 30 years of my life or whatever, 38 years since I was 5 years old, since I was born, I've been arguing with them and saying they're morons generally. I think I'm the first to admit that, we liberals aren't innocent in being, diverse in our thinking or whatever as well. I think we are just equally as guilty, some of us are, if they're not cognizant of how we are thinking and how we're actually feeding ourselves information. But I think the majority of liberals aren't like that. And unfortunately, with conservatives, it seems to be the opposite. Their radical base, which is tea-partiers and Christian conservatives and people like that, the people that I cannot stand, they seem to make up about 70% of the conservative voters, with the other 30% making up what people generally refer to as moderate Republicans, and what other Republicans call Republican name only, meaning that they may vote Republican, but they're not a quote-unquote true Republican. Much like the way Sarah Palin's always saying real Americans or true Americans basically means people that think like her. So let's discuss a few of the issues that are facing our country. And you can tell me what you think if you see a difference between the liberal way of thinking and the conservative way of thinking. Liberal logic and conservative logic, which is what we're discussing here tonight on the Offlimits show. So let's discuss this way. Oh, we've got people in the chat room. Let's see. We've got David. Hey, David. Hey, Bathtub Girl. Tired later, going to let my pillow away. I got here in the beginning, 15 more minutes. I have a tea party. Okay. So let's discuss a few of the issues here. Now, let's start with abortion. When you talk to a liberal about abortion, they generally say, I believe in a woman's right to choose what she does with her own body. And while they don't generally like abortion in and of itself and wish it were rarely done, they support the right for a woman to choose for herself. And it should be a choice between the woman and her doctor, not strangers and not politicians, meaning that politicians and strangers, the government, etc., should not be involved in such a decision. And the choice isn't about liking what abortions are about, but it's about supporting the rights of women And that's why most liberals are pro-choice. Conservatives say abortion is murder. Oh my God, life begins at conception. You're a baby killer. Rape should be seen as a blessing from God, and we shouldn't punish the child. We must protect life at all costs. So there's a huge disconnect between how a liberal sees something as being a right to choose and a conservative saying, if you do this, and you're against God. Now, notice they bring God into almost everything they discuss. Conservatives almost always bring God into every fucking thing. It's as if they don't know how to separate, well, they don't essentially know how to separate God from logic. And unfortunately, it's very true that people who are conservative continue to believe this. Now, let's talk about gun reform. When it comes to guns, most liberals will say, while they support the Second Amendment, it was written during a different time in our society, and guns weren't as advanced as they are now, and our society wasn't as evolved as it is now. So, liberals will generally say that I fully support the right for Americans to own guns, but we need to ensure that certain dangerous types of weapons are not being sold to certain people or any people at all. So it's time we kind of embrace a universal background check that helps to prevent criminals or people who should not have guns in their hands from buying weapons. We've got to limit the size of magazines that go into guns, the capacity of magazines, and ban semi-automatic weapons and guns that are basically just used to be used in mass killings and murder, basically, essentially what they're for. So if we have a sensible gun regulations, in this country, then gun owners will still have access to hundreds, if not thousands, of guns for self-defense and for hunting. So they're constantly saying, conservatives will say what? Conservatives say, well, the Second Amendment shall not be infringed. You cannot have my guns when you take them from my cold, dead hands. Or we can have one. We take my cold dead hands. Isn't that what he said? What's his face? Moses. What the fuck was the guy's name? Charlton Heston or whatever. You can have my guns and take them from my cold, dead hands, they said. And they all stand by that whole type of thinking. And they say the government just wants to take away their guns and take the power away from its citizens. And you can't limit magazine size to 10 rounds, because what if 5 people break into your home? 10 rounds won't be enough. Oh, my God. And guns don't kill people. People kill people. If guns kill people, then spoons make people fat. When you disarm a society, you're openly embracing fascism. Every dictator has one thing in common. They disarm their citizens. If you take away our guns, prepare for the next revolution. I mean, this is fucking crazy, bad shit, crazy bullshit these people are espousing constantly. And this is just about guns. And does the logic make any sense to you at all? No. It makes no fucking sense at all that that we as citizens of this country need to have fucking semi-automatic weapons to protect ourselves, because we don't. That we need to have magazines that hold rounds more than 10 or so rounds, because there may be this mass break-in and we need to kill a bunch of people at the same time. How often do you think that's going to happen? How often does it happen? Rarely, if ever, happen in this country. So it's fucking stupid. And the logic behind this is there is none. I mean, this is the thing we're saying. If you listen to what I'm talking about, the differences, I'm not done yet. I'm going to religion next. But if you're talking about abortion, what I just mentioned about the liberal response versus the conservative response, and then the gun reform, liberal response versus the conservative response, I mean, how can you possibly not see the fallacy in thinking that a conservative has? Not because it's different than what liberals think, but because it honestly is a fallacy in logic. And that is what irritates the fuck out of me. But I'm not done yet. So let's talk about religion. Most liberals say that everybody has the right to believe however they want. Whether you're Christian or atheist or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever you are in this country, you're allowed to live your life and live your life free of any one particular set of religious beliefs. And our freedom of or from religion is one of the key values that gave this country our freedom. One of the reasons it was founded was to get away from religious persecution. And therefore, religion should be kept out of politics. And even within the same religion, often people disagree on certain key issues. So it's best if religion is practiced privately by individuals and not forced publicly into our laws. So a lot of our founding fathers were deists and not Christian, And the word Christianity is not found anywhere in our Constitution. Even in our Pledge of Allegiance, by the way, which wasn't written by our founding fathers, which conservatives often cite this as if it were. The phrase "under God" at the towards the end of the pledge wasn't added until 1954, and that was added in response to communism because communism was seen as godless at the time or whatever. So that is the way a liberal sees religion, generally speaking. A conservative, however, says what? This is a Christian nation. We are given rights from God. I don't care that the word Christianity is not in our Constitution. It's obvious that they would believe that Christianity was what we were supposed to be founded on, and in no other religion at all. And our Pledge of Allegiance says one nation under God, and God being in our pledge proves the founding fathers thought this nation should be Christian. So this is the bullshit. This is the bullshit that I hear from them all the time, and not only about religion per se itself, but it is a thread through every single issue, whatever issue it is. When it comes to conservatives, oh, well, God says this, the Bible says this, whatever religion they ascribe to, which generally is Christianity here in this country, somehow they use it to justify their bigotry and their anti women's rights, gay rights, the rights of racial minorities, etc. So let's talk about homosexuality and same-sex marriage now. Obviously, this is something that's important to me, being that I'm gay and in a same-sex marriage. Gay people are, liberals would say this. Generally, liberals will say there's freedom, for all means freedom for everybody. Freedom for everybody means freedom for everybody. Every single person has to have the same rights as every other individual. And as this country is founded on the freedom of religion, to base laws on religion is unconstitutional. And our community, the gay community, deserves the rights and protections under the law, just like everybody else has. So if two people love each other, there's no legal standing as to why their desire for marriage should be denied. And being gay is as much a choice as being straight. These are the kind of responses that you're going to hear from most liberals about this topic. Conservative response and their logic cites generally homosexuality is a sin. God will bring down misery on the United States if gays are allowed to marry. If two men and women are allowed to marry, does that mean people can then marry a horse or a rock? Homosexuality is a choice. These people chose to be gay. Homosexuality threatens traditional marriage, the family, and our moral structure as a society. This is the shit I hear about these fuckers about homosexuality. Once again, what are they bringing into it? Every fucking single thing I've discussed, abortion and religion and homosexuality, I guess with the exception of gun control, has had some thread of Christianity or religious beliefs going through it. So when it comes to homosexuality, their logic is that because many of these people are Christian, their Bible says something about homosexuality according to what they believe, that it therefore is wrong, and therefore these people should not have equality because it doesn't meet their idea or standard of what is right. Even though it being something that doesn't affect them at all directly, and it doesn't really affect them at all because people who are gay are getting married every fucking day. And is it affecting these idiots, these backwoods morons? No, it's not affecting them at all. It's not changing their lives. It's not affecting their life at all in any way whatsoever. However, they consistently try to deny the rights of people who are different than they are. So a couple more things I want to talk about are welfare reform and the role of government and how they see that, liberals versus conservatives. So when it comes to welfare reform, most liberals will say social, safety nets are important for society, that they're necessary for society to function, and we need programs like that to help those who need help. And while there are people who do abuse the system, just like any other system in this country, or any other system in existence, there's always going to be someone who takes advantage of it. And it does cost taxpayers millions of dollars every year. Those abuses by those few people pale in comparison to those by the top 1% and the hundreds of billions of dollars that they avoid paying in taxes by essentially manipulating our tax code every year. So it's time that we invest more money into the departments which identify fraud in our welfare system so that we can better ensure that the funds being distributed are going to people who need them and not to people who are abusing them. Okay? And in conservative response, is people on welfare are just looking for a handout. They just want people like me to bust my ass to pay their lazy habits and their bills and their drug habit or for their baby mama or whatever. They would rather live off the government than get out and work for a living. It's not my responsibility to pay for those who are too pathetic to get a job. Welfare is socialism. Oh my God, socialism. Get off your ass, you bunch of bums, and get a job. Stop looking to others to help yourself. And we're all given the same equal opportunities in life. It's not my responsibility to bail you out. This is a conservative response. And this is something I've talked about on my show many, many times when I talk about conservatives versus liberal logic. And that would be, as I've said to you, liberals care about helping everybody, not just themselves. Even when it sometimes hurts them to do so, financially or otherwise, they will still help other people because it's the right thing to do, because there are people who are worse off than they are. For whatever reason, they're there to help them, and they want society to work together to be better. Whereas conservatives are all about me, 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 me. What's in it for me? How's it going to affect me? And what do I think? And how do I feel about it? That's all that matters. Not what actually is the actual outcome and what's best for society, but what's best for me individually. And that's the difference. And the last thing would be, I guess, the role of government when it comes to how people are different in a conservative versus liberal response. And liberal responses to the role of government generally would be, well, government's not always the best option. It does often serve a good purpose. The role of government is to protect the people. While some issues, may be debatable as far as how far the government should reach into our personal lives, the private sector is often just as, if not more, corrupt than government. And the government is has a lot of bad things about it. It's far from perfect, but services like that we use every day, most of us use every day, like roads, public school systems, the sewer system, having clean water, traffic signals, law enforcement, emergency services, military, public universities, Pell Grants, interstate highways, and other programs that are like those show that the government can be a vital support structure in all of our everyday lives. These are the things that liberals think and most generally think about government, how we think about it. We say it's how we can help better society through government, and government helps us do that through the ways I just mentioned to you. Conservatives generally say government is evil. Government never does anything right. Oh, have you ever seen it charge $10,000 for a toilet? I've never relied on government ever. Government has never done anything for me. It's totally inefficient. Oh my God, those who support government support tyranny. Government should be small, except when I want a ban on same-sex marriage, abortion, restrictions on women's health, a definition of a national religion, laws that require an ID to vote, and rules that restrict whether Muslims can build their places of worship. Government is the enemy of freedom unless I need it for something myself. So I've gone over abortion, gun reform, religion, homosexuality, same-sex marriage, welfare reform, and the role of government. So after all of this, do you see the difference in thinking between a conservative and a liberal, the way we think about things? Conservatives deal generally with absolutes based on what they believe. If they believe something, everybody else should as well. If they oppose something, so should everybody else. Liberals generally might not always agree with one another. And yeah, we have had our radicals who believe in absolutes based upon their own beliefs as well. But the majority of liberals tend to see a bigger picture on most issues and often, take into consideration individual differences and seek reasonable solutions to key issues instead of having to do this unilateral decision on how things are handled. And a liberal sees issues, and this is the thing, I even had a t-shirt made a while back that said liberals think. And a liberal sees an issue and thinks, first of all. And they may think, I personally might not agree with it, but it's not my right to tell others how to live their lives. We need laws that protect people from others who wish to restrict their rights based on an individual's personal beliefs. And a conservative sees an issue and thinks, I personally disagree with it, and everybody else should as well. So we need laws that protect this issue and stop people from having rights to it based on my own personal beliefs. And therein, people, is the difference. So I'm going to go back in the chat room real quick, and then I'm going to see what's being said because I haven't been looking here. Hold on a second. So I can see what I'm sure Bats are awesome to say about this. Hold on a second. Let me go back here. If I can scroll up. I don't think it's letting me scroll up. Great. Hold on. It says... Fuck. Okay. Wait. It's not letting me scroll up. The last thing I can... Okay. Hey, Icon. Okay, I want to say hi. What did I begin? Blah, blah, blah. She says, I abhor the Tea Party. That's a blue dog Democrat. Life starts through at the thought of sex. She says, they might as well say, she says, it's a smokescreen issue, so they will not be asked real issue questions like, oh, never mind, crazy man, Charlton Heston, that is, yes. Their argument, sorry, I'm reading from the chat room here. I'm trying to read this, but it keeps moving on me. Last thing I can really read was, hold on. I cannot even scroll past it. All I can see is 174,000 vets had SNAP benefits cut. Corporate welfare versus human welfare. Corporations need more benefits instead of our human citizens. You don't think that, do you? I'm sure you don't think that. I believe that. Preaching to the choir. I think my 15 minutes are up. Infrastructure is falling apart. They never mailed a letter either. Okay, I don't know what you're talking about because I wasn't paying attention to the chat when you said all this stuff, so I apologize about that, girl. I can actually have an actual discussion with you about it. But anyway, so that's what I wanted to say about conservatives versus liberal thinking. And there's some other things, though, in terms of how the conservatives think and their logic. For example, one of the things that they do is, see if some of this sounds familiar to you. One of the things they do is they'll give you a false choice. Like, for example, offering only two options for consideration when there are clearly other options. For example, like they might say, if we give up the fight in the streets of Baghdad when we were, there, then we'll face the terrorists in the streets of our own cities, like George Bush said, right? Okay, that's what he said when we were doing that. He said, if we give up the fights in the streets of Baghdad, we will face the terrorists in the streets of our own cities. And oversimplifying, exaggerating, characterizing, and otherwise misrepresenting your position without regard to fact. I'm reading this from a blog. In doing this, your opponent sets up a figurative straw man that he can easily knock down to prove his point. For example, conservatives saw the savagery of 9/11 in the attacks and prepared for war. Liberals saw the savagery of 9/11 attacks and wanted to prepare indictments and offer therapy and understanding for our attackers, says Karl Rove. Another example of the strawman tactic. The shifting of the burden of proof tactic would be presenting an argument as commonly accepted truth, failing to support it with any evidence, and this is what happens every time I talk to a conservative, by the way, and then forcing you to prove otherwise. This tactic is employed out of laziness or due to mask the reality that the facts are not on their side. An example would be, they might say, I think the burden is on those people who think he didn't have weapons of mass destruction to tell the world where they are. Obviously, that's a fallacy, fallacious way of thinking. Slippery slope is the last one. Leaping to wild, sometimes inexplicable conclusions, going, say, from step 1 to step 2, and then all the way to step 10 without establishing any discernible connection. By using this kind of leapfrog logic, a person can come to any conclusion he damn well pleases. For example, all of a sudden, we see riots, we see protests, we see people clashing. The next thing we know, there is injured and there is dead people. We don't want to get to that extent, said Arnold Schwarzenegger, and on the dangers posed by gay marriage. So he took this one small thing and made a mountain out of a molehill, basically, and came back to the same conclusion. So these are some of the tactics that they use and some of the ways that they actually are, illogical is the best way to say it. Going back, I see here, black and white thinking. Yes, exactly, Bathtub Girl. Using fear as a force for their argument. Yes, exactly. And that's the main thing about conservatism and conservatives in general. And that's the main tactic, is to use fear. That's what they did throughout the Bush years. That's what they've done that's what they've done since then. And to instill fear in the masses. And by the way, there's books on this and how to control people, mind control people. And the number one tactic is to use fear in order to control what people think and to have people follow you or vote for you. So it is absolutely true that when it comes to conservative logic, that they have whether they know they're doing it or not, they have a means of thinking that is completely illogical, first of all, and A never follows B, and C never follows B, and D never follows C. So, they never follow logical thinking. And this is why when you try to have a discussion with a conservative, that it's almost impossible. And I've always said, that's why I don't talk to crazy people, because if someone's crazy and they literally are just really insane or out of their mind, there's no point in talking to them trying to have a rational discussion because they can't think rationally. And to me, whenever I have a discussion with a conservative and try to have a rational discussion with them, they start screaming at me and yelling at me and start telling me how I'm wrong and how I'm a liberal and I don't know what I'm talking about, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes, that could be true. They're talking to some people. But even if I come back and say, no, here are the facts, here is the proof that what I'm saying is true, they still, what do? Oh, those facts aren't real. Those sources are not trustworthy, da-da-da-da. And that's what happened to me on the Jay Sands show this week. When I went to the Jay Sands show, I was listening, and they started talking about politics. I chimed in on what I thought, and I said they were talking about race and the fact that Oprah had said that the majority of people who don't like Obama don't like him because he's gay. Now, I told them that I did not agree with that. I don't think the majority of people who don't like Obama, gay, oh my God, I just fucking said gay, that he's half black. And I don't believe that the majority of people who dislike Obama dislike him because he's half black. I believe that they dislike him, most of them, because of his policies or how he's run the government or whatever, whether you agree with it or not. They particularly just don't agree with how he's run the government. And because he's a liberal or whatever, and they don't like him for that reason. So that's the reason I think most people dislike Obama. And of course, there is a section of society, whether it's a third or more or so, that don't like him because he's half black. And Jay made a good point on his show, and I agree with him as well. He said, how is it he could have won twice if America was so racist? Now, it doesn't mean that just because he won that America's not racist, because America is made up of 315 million people or so, okay? Out of those 315 million people, do you think 315 million people are going to vote every time? Some of those are kids, obviously. I think it's probably it's probably under 1 million. It's not 10 million or something like that. Somewhere in that range usually, but it's not a lot of people. When it comes to the majority, the number of people who vote in America, that's what you have to pay attention to. And generally, the people who vote in America on either side, whether you're liberal or whether you're conservative, are typically the fringe of those. So the highly, highly liberal people like myself, or the highly, highly conservative people like him, or the people that I've talked to who are conservative, are the ones who actually get out and actually vote. A lot of times the moderates don't vote at all, or just don't care enough to vote. And of course, there are people who don't vote at all. So you can't really say that just because he's won, that it means America's not racist. It means that out of people he voted for him, the majority of them only needed 51%, right? The 51% of those people most likely were not racist. And even still, just because somebody voted for him doesn't mean they're not racist. And so that's also another fallacy and a false way of thinking, that just because someone voted for Obama doesn't mean they're not a racist. They may have voted for him because they hated McCain. They hated, Kerry or whoever it was he ran against before. So it was always... there's always a reason that people do the things they do, and sometimes, especially when it comes to conservatives, if somehow it protects their own self-interest, they'll do it regardless of what their personal beliefs may be sometimes. So whereas with a liberal, it's really hard to get a liberal to go against their personal beliefs because we seem to be a lot more principled than the conservatives are, as I've illustrated to you on this show, the first part of the show so far. So hopefully people will... Oh, wait. She asked me a question. Let's see here. Let's see. Icano, do you think black people are more racist in this day and age? Truly interested in your thoughts. With the Electoral College, you don't have to have 51%, just saying. That's true. I know that. It's not the popular vote that wins Bathtub Girl. I know that. But you know what I mean when I say that. The question you asked me was, do you think black people are more racist in this day and age? No, I don't think black people are more racist in this day and age. I think that any race, whatever race it is, whether it's black or white or otherwise, is equally as racist as they were 50 years ago, when it comes to those people who are actually racist. Now, when it comes to a preponderance of people, if you're talking about the numbers of people who are racist in this country, do I think there are fewer people who are racist than before? Yes, whatever race they are, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, whatever. I think there are fewer racist people in this country because people are more educated today than they were in the 50s and before. There are more opportunities for education. There are more opportunities to run into people who are different than you. It's not segregated as much as it was in those days. People intermingle and just walking out and going to restaurants or whatever, or meeting through friends or parties and or work, etc. So we have more interaction with races other than just our own, and therefore, as a result of that, we have less racism. And also, as I said, as a result of more education and just more exposure to people who are different than you are. So yes. David says, we are just pissed off. Well, David apparently is pissed off and mad. David, you want to chime in and say why you're pissed off? I'd love to discuss that. David's a black male, and his thoughts would probably be more in line with what black people think than mine, because most people don't even look at me and think I'm black. So it's not something I'm really identified with that much with, except racially, not culturally. So David would know more about what to say about that than I would. He says angry black man syndrome. And that's what I was going to talk about, because I think there are not more angry black men than there were before. I think they were just as angry in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. The only thing is that it was less likely that they were able to fight back in the 50s and 60s because of the way they were oppressed through legislation against them, etc. And so it was smart for them not to say anything and to just keep their head down and do what they were told in terms of society so they can get ahead and make a way, and to get to today where we have more opportunities today. So I don't think that there are more black men out there are more angry. They're more angry than they ever were. I think they're just as angry. It's just that these days we have more, they're more vocal. So we have more opportunity as a society, whatever race you are, to say what you want to say. And now so a lot of white people are like, oh, black people are always mad. Da, 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 da. No, they're not. They're just as mad as they always were. And they're just as oppressed in some ways as they always were. But these days, they are now able to speak out and actually be president of the United States, by the way, and actually say what the fuck they want to say without fear of reprisal from the rest of society. So I do think that is absolutely the difference in people from the 50s and 60s versus people today. Yes, exactly, David, exactly, without being whipped and hung. And that's exactly why we have that today. And it goes for Hispanic people, that goes for Asian people, that goes, for Native Americans, for Aleutian, whatever race people are. It goes for every race, especially in this country where it was oppressive for so long. So I do think that's true. Yeah, and that's why when you ask questions like that, are they really still oppressed? To say somebody is not oppressed, to say that the black race is not still oppressed is ignorant. And I'm not calling you stupid, because you're not stupid, but it's ignorant for you to say that. And perhaps, like you said, because you're not black, that you don't know. And no, you don't know, because yes, black people are still oppressed today. They are still oppressed today. And I do think that most people that are black today still have not the same opportunities, not all the time, obviously, that people who are Caucasian might. But for me, it's really less about race than it is socioeconomic background and opportunity. It's not really about race as much as it is about opportunity. And that's what it's really always been about. And that's really what oppression is about. Oppression is about keeping someone down and unable to rise to the same level as you through legislation, through social policies, etc. And now that we have lifted a great abundance of that, even though there's still obviously racism in America, there's more opportunity now. And so people are on more of a level footing than they ever were in the history of America. But it's not on a level. No, it's not level at all. Why? Because the majority of corporations are run by white, heterosexual, Anglo-Saxon Protestant males, not Latin males, not black women, not black men, not Asian men or women. It's still white, Anglo-Saxon, heterosexual Protestant males, which has been the oppressor of the majority of America for as long as history has been around. I mean, they oppressed the Indians, they oppressed the Native Americans, anybody that got in their way, they tried to take down somehow or another, and they did through policies, social, financial as well, and through government. So it is still the same in many ways, and it goes for women as well. Women are still oppressed today to a degree, not as badly as some races, but they are still an oppressed minority because they still do not make equal pay, as well as the same goes for black people doing the same job, or Hispanic people doing the same job, or women doing the same job. These people still do not have equality. So until all of these things are on equal footing, then no, there is still oppression, and there will remain oppression in this country. So let me go back. I've got to see what you guys are saying. Let's see here. Bathroom Girl says she has her doubts. David says, doubts about what? She says, valid question on my end and what I hear in my area, that blacks are oppressed. David says, the KKK doesn't... Oh, I missed it. I keep trying to scroll up. He says, the KKK... I hate this chat room thing, man. See, I'm in the admin thing, and so it doesn't work the same as it does in the other chat room. Maybe I should go to the other chat room. Let me go in there and do it. It's probably easier. Okay. Let's go up here. So we have... he says... I'm trying to find it. Sorry. Okay, David says, the KKK doesn't always wear white sheets. They wear business suits, police uniforms, etc. That's absolutely true, David. She says, I see Latinos being oppressed and Native Americans. So you're saying you don't see black people being oppressed? You just see Latinos and Native Americans? Really? He says, well, I am black. David says, well, I am black, and I never have had to use my ethnicity to cry racism. But I am not naive enough to think that racism doesn't still exist. 2 words. Trayvon Martin, he says. Absolutely. And she says, what about this? When people find out about your racial background, do they treat you differently? Are you asking me that question? I guess you're asking me that question about the grill, right? I assume you are. And the answer is yes. If you're asking me that question, the answer is yes. When people find out my racial background, they do treat me differently. It's true. And not everybody does it, but I've told this story before. I'll tell you one more time to illustrate the point that people are still racist. And people who are gay are still racist as well. I told this story before, but when I was about 20, I was dating a guy for 6 months, and he and I were at the Village Station here in Dallas, a nightclub here, a gay club. And we were out with his friends in the back patio. And when I was younger, I looked much whiter than I do now. Like, the older I've gotten, I've looked more ethnic. So, like, at a certain point in my life, I looked very white, very Caucasian. And then as I got older, about in my mid-20s, I looked more like Latino or whatever. And then as I got older, more Middle Eastern or whatever I do now, whatever you consider me look like now. But anyway, so then I looked very Caucasian. And so people often just assumed I was white. And so I was hanging around with them on the back patio while they were talking and stuff. And one of them, the guy I was dating, actually, had said something, he said a nigger joke. And I said, excuse me. And he's like, what? I was like, why are you saying that in front of me? And he's like, what are you talking about? I was like, why are you saying a black joke in front of me? That's not funny. He's like, what does it have to do with you? I said, because I'm half black. Hello. He's like, you are? I was like, yes. He's like, I did not know that. And so we had been dating for all this time, 6 months, and we had had sex many times. Great sex, by the way. And obviously he was very attracted to me. I was very attracted to him. We were into each other, whatever. And then after that night, he stopped calling me, and I couldn't get in touch with him. And finally I got in touch with him. I forced him to tell me. I went to his place and said, tell me what the fuck is going on. And he said, I don't want to date you anymore. I was like, why? He said, because you're half black. I'm like, seriously? Because I'm half black, you don't want to date me anymore? He's like, yeah, because I can't date a black person, he said. I was like, why not? You've been dating me the whole time. What difference does it make now? I said, you're attracted to me, and what difference does it make what race I am? because my dad is black, my mother's white, you don't want to date me, even though you're obviously into me. He's like, yeah, I just can't do it. And I've got to go. And he slammed the door in my face or whatever. And so that was it. And so that proves that, yes, people do treat me differently. Some of them when they find out that I am biracial and not just one race or the other. And as I've said before, when it comes to that, people often just don't even know I'm part black at all. And so my experience is very different than David's experience. But once I've told people that I'm half black, I am treated differently by many of them if they're racist, because they're racist. So yes, there's the answer to your question. Okay, so she says, would that happen now, that man's reaction, and that must have hurt. Sorry to hear that experience. That was only, that was only 10 years ago. Okay, or hold on, 20 years ago? It was only 20 years ago. That's not that long ago in terms of racial history. You think that society has changed that much since the 90s? Really? No. No. Yeah, of course it would still happen now. And it's not the only time it's happened. It's happened to me when I was single and I was dating online and stuff like that. And I'd meet people in person, and they'd ask what race I was, and I would tell them, and I would never hear from them again, even though we would actually go out a few times, and after that they would stop dating me. So yeah, there are definitely racist people out there. Even in the gay community, and I've said that before, that's a whole other topic. But when it comes to that, that's, the truth. And so a lot of conservatives, though, will say that racism no longer exists. And the funny thing to me is that it almost inevitably comes from someone who is actually not a minority of some sort. Not always, but almost inevitably does it come from, someone who is white Anglo-Saxon heterosexual Protestant, generally a man. And this person is always saying, oh, well, he doesn't exist anymore because we've got a black president and we've got this and that and blah, blah, blah. Like, it doesn't matter. And the fact is that none of you know what it means to be oppressed or racially profiled or to experience racism until you've experienced it, unless you are someone who's experienced true racism. I don't mean because someone's called you out because you're white, because they one time or twice maybe in your life. I mean an everyday thing, your entire life, that you're looked at differently, you're treated differently by people you're dating, by people you know, friends, people on the street, strangers, people you run into, restaurants, whatever. Then you'll know what racism really is about and what it's like. And so conservatives who say that really piss me off. Now, I wanted to go back to what I was talking about earlier, which was I was talking about earlier that I was in the Jay Sands show yesterday talking about some political questions that they had actually posed. And I had actually said that the question we got into an argument about was, one of the two was whether President Obama or George Bush Jr. had taken more vacations in their interim or their term as president, excuse me. And I absolutely said that it was Bush that had taken more vacations at this point in his presidency. And they all, oh, yeah, no, he didn't. That's not a fact. That's a lie. Blah, blah, blah. You liberals. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of shit that kept going on and saying, right? And so I was like, really? So they're like, you don't know what you're talking about, whatever. So I went and I got the facts. I got them from the Washington Post. I got them from PolitiFact.com, which is an independent nonprofit organization, by the way. And I got these, things from two sources, and I could get them from 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if I needed to prove that, in fact, George Bush took far more vacations than Obama has at this point in his presidency. And so I have to tell you that even presented, and this is often the case as well, presented with evidence to the contrary, conservatives often do not actually admit that they were wrong. Now, if somebody came to me with proof that I was wrong, I would say, okay, well, I'm sorry, I was wrong. I was misinformed, blah, 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 whatever. And that's because I'm a liberal-minded person, and I will take the information into my brain and filter it through and say, okay, this is what I believe thus far has been incorrect, and therefore I need to change my thinking on this issue, because I obviously have been thinking about it the wrong way, and I need to re-examine my thinking on the matter. Instead, a conservative, specifically like last night, will just say, no, you're wrong, oh my God, blah, 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 and whatever. So, and these people, and I hate, and you use the word hate. I hate most conservatives because that are that far to the right, because they're impossible to have a real discussion with. You know what I mean? They're impossible to have a real discussion with. They're impossible to actually have any kind of logical discourse with, because all they do is use their fucking sound bites to actually talk to you about them. And then they were talking about the Fox network and how balanced and how well balanced the Fox network is, blah, blah, blah. I mean, really? The Fox network? Give me a fucking break. So they kept going on and on about that. And hold on. They kept going on about that and how the Fox network is just so well balanced and everything else. And then going about MSNBC and CNN and and saying how they're the horrible places to go to as well. But they said Fox was obviously a balanced place. Now, Fox, as you all know, is not a news network. I'm sorry. News is what? It is balanced and it is fair. It is balanced and it's objective and unbiased. And they claim to be those things, but they are not those things by any means. Neither is MSNBC, which I like. MSNBC is not unbiased either. MSNBC is a liberal news commentary network. That's what I call it. It's not a news network. And Fox is a conservative commentary news network. It's not a news network. It's not real hard news. So if you're actually going to claim that your news network is so completely unbiased, etc., then you might want to actually check your facts and see all the things that they've told lies about, the mistakes they've made, the reporting things that they've gotten wrong. This is a horrible, horrible, horrible place to get information. And unfortunately, a huge part of our population gets their news, quote unquote, from Fox News. It's horrible. Now, there are so many other places you can get unbiased evidence from or unbiased news from. Most generally speaking, your local news is going to be a more unbiased type of a show. Not always. I'm not going to talk about a daytime one, but I mean like the 10 o'clock news or whatever. Generally is going to be less biased. Even though they may have their own conservative agenda or liberal agenda, they're going to be more unbiased than a huge network that makes their money off of commentators. Because all they do is really read the news. Also, if you watch C-SPAN, and you can watch what's going on in government yourself. If you go and read the bills, you don't have to read the whole thing, you can read summaries of them or whatever, you can decide for yourself what our government is up to, what they are specifically trying to do and accomplish, the laws they're trying to get passed, legislation, etc., instead of saying, going by what you're told by some bobblehead on Fox News, including Elizabeth Hasselbeck, by the way. So, I mean, come on. These people are really fucking stupid. They talk of Fox like a religion. BBC News. That's the other thing. That's a good point, too. If you actually listen to international news versus our news and how things are reported, you'll see an enormous difference. Because their news programs, the BBC America, whatever even, are far more unbiased, and they're not like our news is here. And if you watch even Al Jazeera TV, which is, I know a scary name for a network, but that network actually is a really good network, and it's pretty unbiased. It's not liberal and it's not conservative. But these are places you can go and find out the truth for yourself. So my advice to you is this, and the end of the show here, is that you need to go, when someone tells you something, whether it's conservative or liberal, you need to decide for yourself what the truth is. You don't need to take what they say as word. And just because someone's constantly reinforcing your own beliefs doesn't mean that you're right. You have to actually go and decide for yourself and do the digging, do the research, and decide for yourself what the truth is. Find the facts, which is what you should be basing your decisions on, basing your ideology on, basing your political beliefs on. Find the facts and then actually make a decision. Don't base your decisions on something as important as your political slant or what's happening in this country based upon what your people just like you say. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say about this tonight. I appreciate you listening. I'll be back later in the week. And be sure to listen to The Crew Show, a very heated discussion between myself and one of the cast members on The Crew Show. If you're not following The Crew Show, you can follow it on Spreaker.com. You can also follow it on Twitter.com. I think it's The Crew_show on Twitter. Also, Facebook, you just go to type in The Crew Show, I think, on Facebook. You'll find us there. And thecrewshow.net, which is under construction, is also coming up soon. But that's a great show if you like to really hear 3 different perspectives from the same topics from a gay point of view. We've got David from the 5x5 show, who is actually the Whoopi Goldberg of the group. We've got myself, the highly liberal and vocal Joy Behar type, Donovan from the Offlimits show, and then we've got the conservative-minded Ken Boggle from the Ken Boggle show. So be sure and check that out if you haven't already. And be sure also, before I go, I've got to tell you that, no, it's not the 5x5 show, it's the Crew show. It's called The Crew. Just check it out on Spreaker, Bathtub Girl, and follow us there. But I tell you, Friday, just to reiterate, I'm going to the JFK Memorial, 50th Memorial, honoring his assassination or whatever. It's exactly 50 years to the day, and actually it was actually on a Friday when he was assassinated, so it'll be Friday the 22nd of November, just like it was 50 years ago. And it's supposed to be 50 degrees, or 30-something degrees for the high on Friday, and raining, and they will not allow us to take an umbrella, because it says we can't take umbrellas, we can take all this whole list of stuff we can't bring in. So I'm supposed to go out there in my cashmere. I'm not saying this because I'm rich or something. I'm saying because I have this cashmere Hugo Boss shirt, coat that I love, that is in perfect condition, and I had dry cleaned last year, and I want to wear it on Friday because I love it. It's very warm and everything. It's nice looking, and it's very much my style. I wanted to wear that, but I can't wear cashmere in the rain, so because it'll ruin the cashmere. So I'm going to have to actually put something else on, like a fucking leather coat or something, I guess. But I don't really want to do that. But anyway, you might see me on television as a result of it. If you look for me in the crowd, and my husband, who'll be next to me, by the way, we both got selected to be there. So out of a pool of many people who wanted to go. So I feel very fortunate to be selected for this. And there'll be national news coverage. There'll also be local news coverage about it, as well as newspapers, etc. So it should be interesting. So be sure to check it out. And on Friday, I'm going to try to broadcast live from there as much as I can. And if I can't speak because it's something going on, I'll just record as I go. And if it doesn't work for the live broadcast, I'll record it and then post it later. So be sure to look for that. And I appreciate you coming to the show, David and Bathtub Girl. And also, by the way, also Obama's supposed to be there, and the Bushes are supposed to be there, and the Clintons are supposed to be there. So I'm not sure who's actually going to show up, but I'll be able to actually see them in person. I've never seen any of them in person, so it'll be cool. So have a good night, everybody. Thanks for listening. Good night.